Blessings, beloveds. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you guys. Okay, so I just want to spend maybe 5 minutes just to clarify something that may be confusing for certain people who are beginners in astrology, and it's completely understandable why you might be confused. Now, this subject is about what's called solar chart astrology, okay, versus using a timed birth chart. Okay, now this has been inspired through a viewer of mine who just was making a comment, and I can tell by the comments that were made there was some confusion. So it's just inspired me to just to spend 5 minutes teaching something that's very important. Now, solar chart astrology, which is basically what you when you hear astrologers or people talking about your solar fifth house, or Uranus at the moment is in your third house of your solar chart. When you hear comments like that, or when you see astrology written in columns, like monthly or weekly, sort of columns in newspapers and magazines, this is what they're using. They're using this system, which is called solar chart astrology. It's a system that's been around for a very long time. It's quite ancient, actually. It was used by ancient sort of astrologers, if you like, and it's been used with tropical and sidereal zodiacs as well. So, but it sort of it died down, and then it was just revived again around about the 1930s due to horoscope columns, appearing in newspapers and magazines and things like that. And it's just sort of stayed with us. So this can create a lot of confusion for people who do have a time of birth, because if you have a time of birth, you don't need to use this system at all. In fact, you wouldn't. You would use this if you had no time of birth. So let me give you an example. Let me just... So here is a chart for today, okay? This is based in Melbourne. Doesn't matter where it's based. It doesn't even matter about the date. What's important is the example. So let's just say that you are an Aquarius, okay? And this can apply to whether you're an Aries and obviously any of the 12 zodiac signs. So let's just say you are an Aquarius. So what happens is, because you've got no birth time, you can't create a birth chart as such, but what you can create is this thing called a solar chart, okay? And with a solar chart, you always place the sun on the ascendant. Now, with this system, you would use what's called whole sign houses, okay, just to make things more clear as well. And because you don't have a birth time. So you would, if you were born with the sun in Aquarius, you would create a chart where the ascendant would be Aquarius, because the sun is what determines this solar chart, okay? The sun will sit on the ascendant, as it were, okay? So therefore, now you have this solar chart, which you can use as a kind of predictive tool, if you like, to show you sort of what's happening, this month, next month, and so forth. So if you are an Aquarius, the sun is on the ascendant, so that makes your first house in this solar chart, not in a natal birth chart with a time of birth. This is just a solar chart, okay? So in the solar chart, the sun gets put onto the ascendant, therefore making your first house the Aquarius house, okay? Because the sun is in Aquarius. So what follows then is obviously the subsequent signs. So the second house, if you're an Aquarius, the second house for you becomes Pisces. So in your solar second house, you have transiting Neptune and transiting Venus in your second house at the moment, if you were born on this particular day and year. And this is, you can see, these are the transiting planets as they are located today in the heavens, meaning 24th of January 2020. You can see the date on the screen. But if you were born 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, it doesn't matter. You would just draw up a solar chart and you would put your sun on the ascendant, and that would then show you your first house is Aquarius, your second house is Pisces, your third house is Aries, your fourth house is Taurus, and so on and so forth. And then you would look at transits, whether you use an ephemeris or an astrology software program, or whether you find ways to get this online through different, web pages, etc. You would sit down and you would make a list. Okay, where is Mercury today? Mercury today is at 12 degrees of Aquarius. So that would place transiting Mercury in your solar chart, okay, in your first house of your solar chart. We would say, okay, well, where's transiting Mars today? It's at 13 degrees of Sag. So 13 degrees of Sag in your solar chart would put transiting Mars in your solar 11th house. So do you follow what I'm saying? You would just do this with every single planet. You would do this if you don't have a time of birth. If you do have a time of birth, okay, let's go to another chart. Just bear with me because solar fire is playing up. I'm just going to hit no because I don't want other people's charts coming on my screen. Okay. So let's just stick to this as an example, or let me just just bring this new moon in Aquarius that we have in a few hours' time. Well, for us here in Australia, it's in a few hours' time. Okay, so this is approximately the correct chart, okay, as in based in Australia, Australian Eastern Standard Time in Melbourne, okay. Here is the new moon in Aquarius that I just recently did a video for, and I've talked about this extensively, so this presentation at the moment is not about unpacking the new moon in Aquarius. So in this chart, what we can see, this is the chart for the moment of the new moon as it's located or as it appears in Melbourne, Australia. Obviously, the chart would look different if you're in LA, if you're in China, if you're in Greece, etc., etc. When you have a birth chart with a time, let's just say that you had Capricorn ascendant. That means your first house is described by the archetype of Capricorn. Therefore, Aquarius, let me just show you. So here you go. Let's just pretend that you had, I might need to go a bit further to make this clearer. Okay, so let's say that you had 6 degrees of Capricorn as your ascendant sign. Let's just say this is your chart. Now, the new moon in Aquarius, okay, which is just approaching, okay, let's just pretend it's exactly there, all right? For it to be exact, we'd need the moon and the sun to be both at 4 degrees, okay, and matching minutes as well. Let's just pretend they're at 4 degrees, okay? And let's pretend this is your birth chart and you've got Capricorn ascendant. What happens is this new moon in Aquarius lands in your natal second house because this is where Aquarius is contained in your birth chart. So if we go back to, I don't have that chart anymore. Okay. If we go back to the solar chart example, which I'll have to adjust things now, so just bear with me. So this is a chart with no time of birth. And as I said, I suggest you use whole sign houses just to make things more clear. Let's just say that let's just say this was your birth chart. Forget about where everything is. Don't worry about that. Let's just say this is your birth chart and you have Taurus, okay, as your ascendant sign. You know that the new moon in Aquarius tonight is at 4 degrees of Aquarius. So this is a solar chart. This is not an actual natal timed birth chart. You are using a solar chart to try and gain some understanding and perspective of where you're going to experience the transits relative to the position of the where how the solar chart defines the entire chart. The solar chart always places the sun on the ascendant, and so sorry, I shouldn't have said you've got Taurus ascendant. What I should have said is that you've got the sun in Taurus. So let's just give an accurate example here. So what I need to do is all right, let's just say you had the sun in Gemini. Okay, you're a Gemini, in other words. Now what we want to do is create a solar chart. So, okay. So if you're using the whole sign houses and you were born around about the 7th of June, which I believe is Prince's date of birth, by the way, just happened to land there. So what happens is you cast a chart, you use the whole sign houses, and you use the sun, you place the sun on the ascendant of the solar chart, which then creates the entire chart for you. It's the same principle again, doesn't matter what sun sign you are. Whatever sun sign you are, you always put the sun on the ascendant for the solar chart, and then that shows you where all the transiting planets will be in this solar chart for you at any given moment, whether that's today or whether that's in 10 years' time or whether that's in a month's time. So hopefully you follow what I'm saying, because some people are a little bit confused, that they're not understanding that when you're hearing about your solar 5th house or your solar 7th house, and therefore you have transiting Uranus at the moment in your 12th house, for example, that's not the same thing as having a timed birth chart where if you had let's just say you had Aquarius rising and you had a timed birth chart, then transiting Uranus would be in your 4th house as it follows in the shape of your chart, because Aquarius is where your ascendant is, right? So the ascendant starts the chart. That's the time of the reason you have an ascendant is because you have a time of birth. You cannot have an ascendant if you don't have a time of birth, which is why this other system, solar astrology, solar chart astrology, is popular, because a lot of people don't have a time chart. They don't have a time of birth. So this is one way around that issue. Okay. So again, if you're a Gemini born on the 7th of June, you place the sun here in whole sign houses. Whole sign houses always places every single house at 0 degrees. You can see that. If you look around this chart, every single house is 0 degrees, hence the name whole sign houses. Whole sign meaning 0 to 0. That's one whole sign, okay, in one house, starting at 0 and then finishing at 30 degrees in there. You can't see it, starting at 0 again. That's one whole sign, one whole house, hence the name. You use this system when you don't have a time of birth. Do not confuse this when you hear or read columns or hear people on YouTube or whatever saying, you're for the year of Pisces, starting, for the year of Pisces 2020, this is your outlook for 2020. What that person who's presenting that information will do is they will put the sun on the ascendant, and they will say your first house, your solar first house, is Pisces, okay? And then they'll say, your second house is Aries, because it will just follow through in the order of the zodiac. That's a solar chart system. But a time of birth chart is completely different, and the transits relative to your natal chart will be in completely different houses. Now, you can still use this solar chart system even if you have a timed birth chart, but you would not confuse the two as being the same. They are not, they are completely different. Hopefully, I've demonstrated that point clearly enough. If I haven't, please feel free to ask questions if it's not clear. So I'll leave that there, and I hope that's useful, because I think there will be a number of people out there that just may not have understood this clearly, or may not have understood that a solar chart is a completely different thing to a timed natal birth chart, and the transits relative to a solar chart and the transits relative to a timed birth chart will reflect a completely different chart, completely different transits, completely different experiences. Okay, thanks a lot for listening, and see you guys very soon. Okay, much love and bye.